do, I think we can try and help them out as best we can. But basically, one thing that I'd like to remind you too is that Dewey's book is available in the back of the room. It's Honeybee Biology and Beekeeping. Or is that right, Dewey? Honeybee Biology?
Yeah.
And there's so many questions that I always have, and I just told Dewey, this is the truth. I just grabbed his book now, and I go, oh, well, there's the answer right there. And I had his book for several months now, and I now have started using it as a reference book, which is probably what it's for, right, Dewey? Anyway, let me see. Tonight also, Glenn is back with the Pollen and Nectar Report, the Bridgetown Pollen and Nectar Report. So, believe it or not, every month there's something that's available for the bees, including January. But we'll see what's going to be this month, so be tuned for that. An important item here is the nominations for the elections. The elections are coming up at the first of the year, and so we'd like to encourage anyone. We've got a few open, at least one open position right now, the librarian position, but we are looking at modifying minor modifications to the bylaws and to address some of the things. We're basically doing some combining and maybe reallocating responsibilities, roles and responsibilities. But for the most part, you can do this for a couple of terms, but each year there is election. So if somebody needs to jump off, and we need to start working with somebody, side by side, to try and do some succession planning for the group. So we'd really like to encourage those of you that are interested in being more involved with PUP to get involved as an officer. It's actually quite interesting to see such a group. We're quickly becoming one of the larger groups in the state, and there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to make sure that we have everything sort of lined up and ready to go each month, and that we have event planning and those sorts of things. So one thing that I'd like to also bring up is that we have, the next 2 months, we're going to have some fun events. In the November meeting, which is November 6th, we're going to have a honey tasting, and we're going to have, a friendly competition with everybody bring their honey. Those of you who had honey, I'm sure, unless you're not collecting the honey this year from the bees, or unless you live somewhere far down in the Willamette Valley. I hear they didn't get any honey down there, but we'd like you to bring your honey, and we'll have tasting. We'll have some crackers and spoons and things like that. We're going to also ask that some of the residents join us from the facility here. Gary is I'm working with one of Gary's employees to make sure that we have let them come in and meet us and taste some of the honey, some of the best tasting honey around, I would think, from the rural areas of Portland. The urban jungles. Are there rural areas in Portland? I'll bet there are. Then on December 4th, the meeting after that, we're going to have the Member Beekeeping Showcase. And the idea behind that is that we're going to have like tools, services, products from various members. There's some of us that are just here to be just a simple backyard beekeeper, and that's really all you want to do. Others are more involved, and you have whether you paint hives, or you produce honey, or sell queens and bees, or teach classes, other services, candles, whatever you do, and it's involved with beekeeping. We'd like to showcase that, and so we'll have a chance for each of you to be able to come, and we'll all have maybe some tables out. We haven't organized it yet, but when we do get it a little bit more formally organized, we'll post some information about it. I want to go back just for a second, those on the November 6th honey tasting meeting. If you are interested in helping organize that, Lois Levine, who is, Lois is here, she's in the back here on the back, your back right or left or whatever, is going to help organize that. So please leave your name at the break with Lois if you'd like to help with organizing, coordinating the honey tasting event. And we may also do some coordinating after that for the showcase, the member showcase event in December, but we'll have another meeting between now and then, and we can talk about that. Coming up, October 6th is, I don't know if you've all heard about it, but the only nursery and garden store in town that immediately disposed of their neonicotinoid-based pesticides after the bee poisoning in Wilsonville and subsequent one in Hillsborough, pulled all those products off their shelves immediately, and that's Garden Fever on 24th and Fremont. So there's a process called, which is a new name to me, called Carrot Mob. And the idea is it's sort of the carrot and the stick thing. So we're going to use the carrot portion of this to reward them for doing the responsible thing and getting these neonic products off of their shelves and putting some signage up that says, these things are deadly to the insects, to the pollinating insects. So we want to kind of reward them, but basically it's going to be a huge crowd. There's a bunch of us from the group. I think, are you there, Brian? No. Yeah. And Glenn and I will be there. There's a bunch of other people that are going to be there talking about what we are doing involved with bees and other pollinating insects. But the idea is that we just swamp them with business for the day. And that's October 6th between 12 and 4. I mean, I guess you could go there anytime, but that's when the event really is going on. That's this Sunday, October 6th. October 31st is the first day of the Oregon Beekeeping Conference. So I'd love to encourage you, any of you that are planning on attending. It's an incredible amount of good information. There's some great speakers there this year, and we've got I can't think of them off the top of my head. I actually have them written down here. But you can go to the Oregon State Beekeeping Association website, or OSBA website, and you can download a registration. If you're interested in going, it's 3 days. Well, it's 3 days. Well, it is 3 days, but two full days. Third day that they've added this year on Thursday, but it's I think the full conference is 125, I think, isn't it? But Dewey, you might have something else about it. Yeah, that's what I thought. In the back, I don't know if we have them tonight, but I just want to mention again, we have a pub honey extractor that is available for members to use and check out, and it includes a decapping scratcher, and that's available. I don't know who has it now, but whoever has it is not, I don't think anyone's using it right now, so it's available to check out if any of you need a small extractor. It's, I think, a 2-frame extractor. Also, we have the bee-friendly yard signs. I don't know if those are back there tonight, but if those are the little signage with the posts that we've got, and those are available if you want to put one of those in your yard. Basically, I think it says pesticide-free or something like that. Right, Michael? Let me see. It's Zenger report. I don't see Stephanie tonight, but those of you that are participating with the Zenger Pub group, we continue to encourage you to get out there. There's lots of honeybees out there, and it's a great way if you only have one colony, or maybe you don't have any colonies. It's a great way to get some hands-on experience. Right now, we're coming into the time of year where you're really not too hands-on, but it's the physical part, or the beekeeping part of what we do here on our monthly meetings, and the educational part. This is a great place to. It's the other half of beekeeping for Pub. So tonight's raffle, we've got, I don't think we did the raffle last month, and I apologize, so we're going to do a couple of things tonight. We've got Ridgetown Bees is donating an extractor for a rental, what we do, I think 36 hours, isn't it, Glenn, for an extractor, which is normally $20 for our customers, or $25, I think, for non-customers, but that's going to be one of the things. Then we also have I think there's supposed to be some perennials, flat of perennials here, but I haven't seen them yet, and they may still come here before the end of the night, some plants that can be maybe put in the ground here during the rainy season. Next meeting is November 6th. Don't forget, it's the honey tasting. Talk to Lois at the break, and she's got her hand raised back there, but I'll make sure that we have a little sign-up sheet there for those of you that want to participate. Oh, I see the perennials coming in right now. So I believe, at least I see some plants be in front of a person. So good. So we'll have those two. Let me see. Have I covered everything here? I think so. We want to start off with, tonight we're going to have quite a bit of time to answer questions, go over what's going on with the colonies and the hives, the health of the hives, anything you want to know. So Dewey, without further ado, I'd like to have Dewey come on up and start us off.
These were 10 pictures that you've been seeing. Any questions on any of those as it's run through? Did it make any sense? Or make some sense?
I have a question.
Yeah.
There was quite a few pictures with hives that looked like they were maybe sitting on the ground or had foliage in front of them. I thought that was a no-no. Is that something we can do?
Yes. The sitting off the ground is a convenience to ourselves. Colonies on the ground do okay. In fields, in areas that the weed will grow up right in front of them. So you should try to keep that free, but we never do.
I can say on those two pictures was on there as an example of what not to do.
Oh, okay. Maybe you should put a big
Or
X
do it if you
across
want.
it.
Yeah, you can do but the ones she's referring to had plants growing all in front of the entrance. And
Right. There were a couple of those.
Yeah.
Okay.
All righty. We'll get out of this and try another one. I mentioned this one before, so I've keyed up some things now that we might consider in terms of our plan for our bees in the fall for October. I just have come, if I fall asleep during this, it's because of my jet lag. I've just come from Ireland, got in last night. Northern Ireland in the city of Derry is one of the cities celebrated as City of Culture. And part of the culture was a beekeepers meeting that included both the Irish and the Northern Ireland people that came to one meeting and sat down together. In fact, Derry is a very sad city. It's had a great deal of this unrest. And they just had finished basically a city hall, a guild hall. Just a fantastic building. We had it there. Part of the program, we went into a school. The schools are doing, with an artist that has come into the schools, they're doing a whole component with bees. So it was an interesting experience. I talked about the Irish contributions to beekeeping, and I had, it was one of those weak moments. I said, oh, sure, that sounds like a lovely topic that I'll talk about. I had the faintest idea what I was going to talk about until I finally put my slides together like the night before. So one of the things I did talk about, and it's relevant here, is that throughout the British Isles, Scotland and Northern Europe, they have been into survivor stock for longer than we have here in the States, actually. And they believe in this dark bee, a black bee, because it is basically part of the German bee. But they feel that in parts of Ireland there's an Irish bee, in parts of England there's a black English bee. You see in parts of Scotland there's a black bee. And doing a survey very much like Debbie Delaney and Steve Shepard from Washington State did here, they have found some of the stocks, just as we have found some of the old German black bee stock in the United States. Most of it we found was in the Appalachian areas in the East Coast, not much in the West Coast. But one of the efforts that I talked about is their contribution in terms of beekeeping has been this effort in terms of survivorship. This is a kind of a nasty bee. One of the reasons we went away from this stock is because it is somewhat susceptible to disease. Whether there is any Irish bee in all of Ireland, the island to the left, is questionable because about 1897 they had a wave of American foul brood, and it was blamed on the introduction of the Langstroth hive into Ireland, the hive that we use. Now, because the Langstroth hive is a movable frame hive, we go into it, we remove frames, we move frames, we bring in contaminated hive tools and gloves, et cetera, in terms of our manipulating of colonies. So it was of all things blamed on Langstroth. So I talked a bit about hives and talked about a little bit about bees as a contribution. But this is the basic survivor stock issue that we've talked about here. There is an Irish hive that's shown on the left. That's the Abbott hive. And it was built after the potato famine as we know it here. They know it as the Great Hunger, when Ireland exported most of her citizens. The hive was developed as a way of trying to rescue beekeeping that went back well into the story of the introduction of bees into Ireland. One of the saints, of course, leaving Wales, a swarm or bees settled on the ship. He turned back. They tried to get the bees off. They wouldn't go. He started sailing again, and more swarms joined. Another swarm joined the original one. He went back. They tried to get him off the ship, and it didn't work. So finally, on the third sailing, yet another swarm joined his ship, and he sailed across Ireland. Of course, that's how bees were introduced to Ireland. But the black bee was there earlier. Anyway, after finally land reform, this hive was developed for Ireland. And it was very well done for Ireland, and this fits into what we're talking about tonight, because it was a very sturdy hive. It had very short legs, so it wouldn't blow over in all the winds. Wherever you stand in Ireland, there are winds. And it rains all the time, so it was a very sturdy hive. It's a double-walled hive. Very sturdy hive, and of course it had the peaked roof to shed the rain. So this was a particular hive. The issue on the right is that is a beehive house. It's a granary. This is a house built without a keystone, and then all the stones are overlapping, a type of construction that is particular to Donegal and the western coast of Ireland, and there are some examples in Maine, in New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. And yet we don't think any of our native cultures was able to build, didn't have the culture to be able to build this type of a house. Some of the early history that perhaps we had Vikings visit our shores before the colonials, Vikings that came from Ireland. So some of those are the things that I finally came up with. All righty, October, 3 issues, but we can discuss a lot more. Healthy bees. Right now, our colony should be rearing the bees that will rear the fall bees. We're that last generation before the bees really change. We can discuss that in terms of what's been happening weather-wise, and then adequate winter stores are our third issue. Healthy bees, I have demonstrated this before. This is not a healthy-looking pattern unless you've got very hygienic bees where they're pulling out larvae that had mites, so you get this very positive pattern. This is idiopathic brood disease syndrome, where we just don't know what in the world is going on. But colonies that have it, so if you unfortunately are seeing any of this, the chance that they're surviving is greatly reduced, whether they'll be able to survive the winter or not. This has patterns. What we're seeing, of course, are the cap stage, but if we then look closer, we will see that there are larvae that are not healthy. Now, healthy larvae, when we pull them out of a cell, should be white. They should glisten, as the one shown here. In this case, if we pull out larvae in between these capped cells, they're not. They're brownish and in a process of dying or already dead. The symptoms are very much like European foul brood, in that they're twisted in the cells, but they may also rope out, which is a symptom of American foul brood. And if you actually take a sample and send them off to us at Oregon State or send them off to the USDA, it comes back as not able to distinguish what you sent in. No discernible disease being able to be distinguished. So it doesn't come back European foul brood. It doesn't come back American foul brood. So we're not really sure what's going on. It's the type of thing, if we see this, the chance of a colony surviving is pretty darn poor.
Is that what some beekeepers call snot brood?
This is also snot brood, and its predecessor, what I've talked about here, is PMS, parasitic mite syndrome. But we'll see this in brood without there being a lot of mites. So it's the cruddy brood. You can Google that. Snot brood, because that's sort of what these larvae resemble. Not healthy and not glistening as they should. We're seeing some colonies with this throughout the state. I've been showing this slide now for the last month or so at meetings, and afterwards people come up and say, well, I saw that. This is not American foul brood. American foul brood, of course, is the most serious of the diseases. That typically ropes out. You can see the straw there and that stringy piece of leftover or decomposing larvae in between. In the boxes show the scale. So if you ever get any used comb, this is what you look for. This is a good way to look for it. The scale, that is then upside down. So the scale tightly adheres to the lower cell wall. So these are very different diseases, and our treatment of these are very different. This time of year when we find unhealthy colonies, if you find that anything that looks like the BPMS, this brood disease syndrome, there's not an awful lot we can do anymore. Some people have felt that if they feed the antibiotic that is approved for European foul brood, the colonies do seem to improve. But you have to be of a mind that you want to go ahead and treat with an antibiotic. So that would be the terramycin at this point. In this particular condition, we don't yet have a history of there being resistance. With European foul brood, with American foul brood, there is a resistance to the terramycin. And so the commercials have gone to a related antibiotic. There's two others on the market. Tylen is one of them.
The quick question is there evidence that it might be contagious through drifting if you have multiple hives?
Great question, and yes, very definitely. What we might want to try to do is, as much as possible, is to isolate that colony that has these six symptoms. When we do studies of what colonies get disease, there's a statistical test of nearest neighbor, and when we have a colony with disease, the nearest neighbors have a greater probability of having the same disease as another random colony pulled from the same apiary. So isolation in your own apiary, in the backyard if you have it, or in another backyard away from where you have the rest of your colonies. There does not seem to be anything lingering. So if you have a colony with this, and they do die out over winter, go ahead and feel free to restock them next spring when we have bees available, swarm, or you're ready to buy a colony, you're ready to buy a new or a package. Doesn't seem to be any residual from disease. Unlike here in the box, American foul brood, we never ever want to put bees back on that scale because that scale then breaks down, becomes vegetative, and kills the colonies that you put back on it. Yes?
So why wouldn't why is there the irregular tapping?
The irregular pattern is because the queen was faithful. She laid a very regular pattern. See on that little insert on the left how a nice neat pattern that queen has laid. All the larvae all the pupa are at the same age. That's what she did on this frame, the plastic frame there, and the bigger of the frames. But the larvae have died. So they're not hatching they're not getting to the cap stage. So that when we pull out the frame of the cap stage, we've got a lot of empty cells. Well, that was full at one time. The larvae never advanced far enough to get to be a cap.
So how is that different from, just them, hatching and coming out? Like, wouldn't that also create that sort of pattern sometimes?
It does. At the time of hatching, you will get that pattern, but again, it will normally be much more regular. For example, if we pull out the frame in the summer that just as they're hatching, there'll be a lot of them just hatching right at that point, all within a matter of short hours. So these were laid at all about the same time. They're just not getting to that stage.
Are these remaining cap broods viable?
Great question. This is a disease of the growing larva stage, so if they're healthy enough to get to the cap stage, they're going to be viable. However, if a mite has gone in there, a female mite has gone in there, and too many, it may not come out as a virus, it may come out with deformed wing virus or something. But yes, those capped ones will reproduce everything else. Yes?
And this
Because this looks similar to the pattern that we saw earlier this summer, where they were showing us about the inbred bees, the bees that have the double chromosome thing. And this is different from that.
This is different in the sense that that one is about half of the cells will not have it. So we're getting more than, or in this case, more than half getting to the cap stage. The diploid brood is always present there. That always does occur, but it's always at a very low percentage, 2% or less. So you will find even in the best bred queens, for example, the lower insert on left, even the best bred queens, they miss cells, those blanks, or in the cell they put an egg that was the wrong egg, and so it's been removed by the workers before it got to the diploid stage, what we call diploid condition. The question was, well, when we have inbreeding of queens, what do we get then? We get a very, very even, if you can imagine, even a worse looking situation on our brood. We get a lot of brood that's not hatching. Yes?
Is this something that could happen any time of the year, or is it more seasonal?
Yes and no. This we're finding as a fall condition now. In the spring, we will find colonies that have sometimes fairly high incidence of European foul brood, sometimes a higher incidence of sac brood. And so we'll see that pattern in the spring. It doesn't persist in the spring. It does here in the fall. Our most characteristic symptom of colonies in stress in the fall is that there's too few bees. You've got X frames of brood, but there just are not enough bees to really cover that brood. So we get a wet, cold snap as we've had this past week, and doggone don't we then start losing brood pretty quickly in bees. That's that typical pattern of the bee PMS, and that shows up some years worse than in other years. Okay? So healthy bees. The other, as I say, is we're on that last generation. The next generation of bees that they should be rearing in our colonies should be the bees that we call fat bees, or the bees that are going to be able to live for 6 months on through our winter time. And the difference is that the bees do not then, after the end of this month, really participate in any brood rearing. So that the brood rearing is probably, I guess, we think now, is one of the toughest on bees themselves. And so if they participate in the brood rearing, that means their glands are active, and that shortens their life. If they have heavy nosema infections, that somehow interferes with the gland development of individual bees and shortens these lives. Fall bees are just the opposite. Those are bees that don't do much brood rearing, don't have the shortened life, but indeed have the longer life. Those are the critical bees to get out through winter. In addition to some other things, fall bees have a lot of body reserves, have a lot of fat body, and their glands reach a point and then just simply arrest development, so it's no longer a drain on the body. Those bees then are usually not reared until we really get a shutdown of the season. Now, we've had a temporary shutdown with all of the weather that we've had just this past week, but the bees adjust for those temporary shutdowns. It's when the fall days are really, really fall days. The bees are measuring the day length, and so they're going to rear those fall bees. They'll rear the bees that will rear the fall bees, and a colony to be able to do that needs to be in a healthy condition. They're not colonies that are now stressed, and we've had 2 in a row. We've had a drought stress, now followed by what appears to be an early fall, a period of time when there should be some flowers out available. There should be only partial rain for most of the days that they can get out those flowers, and yet we've had a lot of rain. We're catching up on our drought condition. And so those are all stressors for that colony. And unfortunately, they're coming just at the wrong time. We're coming at a time when we're trying to rear the bees that are going to rear those fall bees. That and And as beekeepers, as our colony stewards, we can't do very much about those conditions. We really cannot. We can feed to try to get around the fact that they're not getting out the flowers. And the commercial beekeepers with a week like this will also then be putting on protein. They'll be feeding one of the commercial proteins that are available. It's an extra cost, it's an extra effort, but they need to have their bees ready in February, so they can't afford to take a very poor fall because it's not going to produce a good winter for them, and then their paycheck coming with rentals in January. So we've got some challenges out there with our colonies this time of year. And finally, the adequate stores. What we're looking for with our colonies is that they have cut down in brood rearing. We're probably not seeing full frames of brood like this at this time of year. The bottom bar is on the bottom here, so this frame is flipped over. You can see concentric brood patterns here. This is much more typical of spring. But if we're seeing, as we pull out the frame, we're seeing this very poor coverage of adult bees, not enough bees to cover the brood. That's this indication of this being PMS, and that is viruses taking out the adults. So the adults are disappearing from your colony. They're flying off. They're flying away. They're sick bees, so they're abandoning home. And then as we get this cold spell of some of the nights this week, there's just not enough bees to try to cover the brood. Again, it's hard. It's easier to diagnose afterwards than trying to make our decisions. And we should be able to see in our colonies the equivalent of about a couple of frames of pollen, but not this year. Normally we have enough pollen sources. This year it doesn't look like they're going to be producing that pollen. So that's as I say, some of the larger beekeepers, they feel they need to start their protein feed now. The data on protein feeding in October is very mixed. It doesn't keep strong colonies strong, but what it does is it allows their medium-sized colonies to then expand once pollen becomes available in the spring. So it's a maintenance feeding. Whereas the sugar feeding, that feeding is being able to have enough food stores so that they can get on through the winter. Yeah.
Is it going to hurt if you've got a strong colony if you fed them? It just isn't going to help?
Feeding a strong colony is not going to hurt. It may help, but a strong colony, we will still see fair attrition. We've had a bit of an evolution in terms of our thinking, and that is the strong colonies are perhaps the hardest ones to try to get through winter, and weaker colonies are perhaps a little bit easier. Also, they have less invested in a weak colony versus a strong colony, the bees and the beekeeper. But no, with a strong colony, to be feeding them is not going to hurt at all. So our ideal colony should be by the middle of this month, by the end certainly, that bees in the bottom, if there still is brood, iffy this year, some colonies still will have brood. They're generally in the middle, generally between the two boxes. I'm showing two standard Langstroth boxes in this illustration, but it doesn't have to be two standard Langstroth, whatever your arrangement may be. Some honey to the outsides and a little bit over the top of those where those four things are in the middle, and then a box of honey. Whether it's a super size or it's a full size, it does not have to be full. If it isn't full and you still haven't extracted, you end up making the decision, do I take a chance and lose the colony without enough stores, or do I sacrifice extracting my supers and leaving supers on top as feed? So in some cases you might have 3 boxes on them because then the top box would have feed in it. We're getting to the point where we've got to think about switching our feeding. Our feed usually at this point, to get this type of an arrangement, would be what we call a heavy syrup. We're trying to get as much sugar into solution as we can. Pure cane sugar, good sugar, or beet sugar, mixed into a solution, a very thick solution, and fed usually at the top of the colony with any number of types of feeders that you might make or buy. That extra moisture that we add to the colony in another month, the end of this month, is adding an additional moisture stress to the colony. So if we want to continue to feed past roughly, usually our cutoff is the middle of the end of October, we are thinking of feeding dry sugar fed at the inner cover at the top, rather than a sugar syrup, even though the heavy sugar syrup. It's just the extra moisture stress left.
Question on putting a super on with or without, or if it has a queen excluder, you take that out or leave it in?
Great. If we're going to leave a super on top of food, we leave it with that black bar as our queen excluder and then the super on. Our conventional wisdom has always been that if the cluster moves on up above a queen excluder to use the honey that's available, then the queen could be left below and freeze to death. The bees could essentially move away from where the queen is. However, when we leave that as a super, usually they're not going to advance into the entire super. It will not be at least in the second box and into the super. So you're taking a little bit of a risk that you're going to end up with a whole mound of bees trying to get above us, the extruder. The queen can't. She freezes below. We're getting too cold. But that's a pretty minor chance. So if you don't want to have brood in that super, you have nice white supers, they're light wax supers. You don't want brood reared in those supers. That will darken honey. Then go ahead and leave the extruder on. I think everywhere you read, you will probably read, make sure the extruder is off the colony. So both sides of the story.
You know, one thing, while you're talking about extra supers, you've got a couple of shallows that you neglected to take off, and they're still up there. And there's no honey in them. I mean, it's basically they didn't draw a comb on it. Should those go, or what?
Empty supers that have either foundation or have nothing in them, they can come off colonies at this time. There's very little wax moth pressure with cold nights, so that even if there's that brood reared in them, there usually isn't any pressure of wax moth display. So they can come off. If there is still honey and you haven't extracted honey, we can't protect that honey the way the bees can. So our conventional wisdom is if you have honey that you haven't extracted, your extractor is down or you've never made the arrangements to boil one or whatever, the best solution is to leave that honey on the colony, and then you can extract it if you wanted to in the spring. Yeah.
I'd like to kind of see a show of hands if anybody else is experiencing this. It seems like I have a whole lot of bees, but they have hardly any honey at all. It seems like they have some pollen and a little bit of brood, and it looks like worker brood, but I haven't seen any eggs, and there's not a whole lot of honey. And then do I just feed the heck out of them until like the third week of October, and then cut it off with thicker syrup so that they don't get too much moisture? Is that all right?
How many in that situation would feed the thick syrup now? Okay. So there were 3 or 4 questions in there. One of the questions was, if we've got a colony with very little honey on that, would we now feed that colony a thick syrup? How many would want to do that? Yeah, most of the hands. Okay. The other question is, how many are seeing, as you've looked in your colony, I don't know about this past week, but prior to the bad weather, how many were seeing very little brood in their colony? How many were seeing a lot of brood in colonies at that point? Okay. And of course, there are both. There were a few more hands for seeing a lot of brood. So the fact that you're seeing little brood indicates that those colonies are shut down. Not seeing eggs. It's very tough this time of year to find eggs. In fact, if you see eggs and you go back in a week later this time of year, you might see eggs in the very same cells that you just looked in this week and saw eggs. And it's not that the eggs have lasted that long. They haven't. What has happened is that the queen is being very confined in her egg laying, and she's just laying in a very narrow area, and they're cannibalizing the eggs. Okay, so it's very difficult to see the eggs at this time of the year. Some people are indeed seeing little brood. How about honey stores? The third part of that question was very little in honey stores. How about others? How many are seeing very little honey stores? Okay. How many are seeing a lot of honey stores, are not really concerned, not really worried? See, so it's about even in terms of that, and you know, I think that's typical. But if you are seeing light on stores, then we still have a month to do some feeding. And you can feed heavily. In other words, not one little mason jar, but 3 or 4 mason jars. Feed a lot of syrup. Anything else in the
So you talked about an entrance feeder, it sounds like?
No, feeding at the top is better.
With a
Feeding at
mason
the
jar?
top.
I'll have to look into that, thank you.
Yes.
A gentleman told me you take like a Ziploc sandwich bag and put your syrup in there with a little bit of thyme so that help kill the mice, help control the mice, and then poke 8 to 11 pinholes in the bag and lay it in there so the bees can help themselves.
Yeah. The thyme will not mix with the sugar syrup. Recognize that. No matter how much you shake it, how much you stir it in. But some people like to do that. Others like to go to one of the products that's available, such as Honeybee Healthy, and put about a teaspoon in per, about a half a teaspoon in per Ziploc bag. Use the big Ziploc bags, put them in on top of the colony, and then poke holes on the top of them. The bees will then crawl up over the top. Their weight will then push that down enough that sugar will ooze out of the Ziploc bag.
So if you're going to use that method, would you recommend setting the bag right on top of the frames?
Right on top of the frames is a little bit better. They will take a little bit more of it than if you've got your inner cover in between.
Okay.
But otherwise on top of the inner cover. In which case, if you've got a large number of feeders, don't leave your colony open at the top. Put an empty box around there and put your cover on top of that. Ziploc bags is one of those methods of feeding. Any jar that have a removable lid, take the point of a nail and make half a dozen to a dozen holes in that. Put your syrup in the jar and then invert that jar right on top of the frames, and then put a chamber around it to put your cover back on your colony. There are some very good high top feeders. If you've seen it, there are plans to even build some yourself. They leak after a while. Making your own high top feeders is a great idea that never seems to work. It's a challenge. It's a real challenge feeding top bar hives this time of year. And a challenge is where do you put the syrups that they're going to consistently take it. In some cases, if you can get it in on the bottom, on the bottom of the box, that will work. In other cases, move your follower board out 1 or 2 frames, leave that area empty, and put your feeder right in there. Even to the point of taking a big Coca-Cola bottle, 2-liter bottle, or Sprite, or a soda bottle or something, and putting your syrup in there, and even poking holes in that will ooze the syrup out that the bees will come out. It is a real challenge feeding top bar hives this time of year. Yes?
Okay. Talking about feeding, one of the feeders that I've got is this white tray, and it looks like a cottage cheese container that sticks on the middle of the hole where they're able to crawl up into. And when I've used that before, it seemed to bump into 2 problems. One is that it molds, and second of all, the bees would come up and a lot of them would drown. Is there any way of redeeming those, or just are they totally worthless?
No, a lot of people use that type of feeder. I'm trying to think of the name of that feeder. What's the feeder with the mesh in the middle that they come up in? There's a name for that. Anyone think of they are available commercially. Any feeder has that they can get into directly into a syrup pool has the issue of drowning bees.
Mhm.
There's no perfect one at all in that. Swinty, yeah, they sell that one as well. The division board feeder, the one that replaces the frame on the edge of your box, is a more common type of feeder, and we put ladders in areas for the bees to crawl in there, but you can have a fair amount of dead bees drowning in there. I don't know, and no study has been done, but it probably isn't very good for the bees to be feeding on a feeder where there's a lot of dead bees that have accumulated in the feeder. So maybe trying to put less syrup in, replenishing it more often might be a way to get around that. Or building a barrier in there, even to the point of putting a whole bunch of little small stones along that center feeder where they come up. So they would be standing on that then rather than plopping into the syrup pool. But probably less syrup at a time. Anyone else have that experience with that type of a feeder? This is the one that has a center bar with they'll come up in the center bar and can go to a right or left feeder.
I need something like that, and I put a pan, but I just got a very thin piece of plywood and drilled holes in it, so there's just a little mesh, and they come down on top of that, and then the syrup can't really get much above that, and there's enough room for them to get down to that. So if you just float something on top of that, and I've seen people just put dried plant stuff, but I just drilled a little raft for them, and that seems to work real well.
That seems to work, the raft, yeah. I can't believe a feeder with lots of dead bees is really good for bees. Yes?
So, so we have to the end of this month to feed a heavy syrup, and then you said go to dry feeding.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Just the granulated sugar or fondant sugar.
Really, just put like sugar in just dry sugar in the feeder. Pour it into like a feeder that we've been discussing.
Just on the inner cover, if you use an inner cover, or if you do not, into one of these types of high top feeders. Others like to make that into a candy, like a hard candy. And what happens, the underneath side of that gets all the moisture, the warmth from the bees, is more of a slurry, where the outside, as you look in, you almost have to take a pick to kind of break it up. But then the inside, where the bees are, is like a slurry. So that hard candy feeder is also a very useful one as well. They will actually build a rim for your colonies, and actually you boil sugar not to caramelize it in the sugar, but prior to that point you need a candy thermometer to do it. Now you actually pour it into this thing and let it solidify in your top feeder, your rim feeder. We got one here.
Is there such a thing as overfeeding them? Like, is there a limit how many mason jars you want to give them, or?
Yeah.
Or do you just finish, until they keep taking it, you just give them more?
I'm not seeing any information. We certainly have conditions where in the spring they are honey bound. There's just too much honey in the way.
It's harder for them to
They
feed
don't
it up.
expand. Sorry?
If they have too much honey, it's harder for them to feed it up.
Hard for them to eat it up, yes. Yeah. I don't know. Mark, can we overfeed bees in the fall, do you think? Mark Johnson?
I've heard of hives getting honey bound, but the only ones I've seen have been, they had a problem with the queens in here. That they weren't laying properly.
The queens weren't establishing their area.
Or maybe I'm too cheap and don't feed them that much, but they can't get honey bound.
So
But what's the average you would normal beekeeper would feed? Like, is it 9 mason jars? Is it like, how many quarts you would give them every winter to a regular hive?
Glenn, it's highly variable.
Well, half the hive, first.
See how much they weigh, see how much your hive needs. They might need 1 quart, they might need 9 quarts, but you need to know what the weight of the hive. Like, no.
I was just curious if there's like an average number and if you can see like, oh, they're not taking as much or they're taking too much.
Well,
50 to 60 would be this style here, which is more than they need, so you're giving them some extra. So if that top box doesn't come up, it really resists. It really feels heavy to the ball, the handle on the front or the back. It's probably in good shape. We've always said that the bees will know when they've had enough, so they would stop feeding. So you put a feeder on, you come back in a week, and they haven't taken anything from it. However, under nosema conditions, if the bees have a heavy nosema infection, it's affecting their gut, and they stop feeding at the very time when they should be taking feeders. So one of our symptoms of this bee PMS, bees at risk, is not enough adult bees to cover the brood, plus when you put the feeder on, they ignore it. So if it's feeling light and they're not taking the syrup, that's probably an indication of some of the other problem, disease problem. I don't know. I don't think we can overfeed them. Most of us get tired of doing it. It's an onerous task. It really is.
Do you ever just roughly estimate how strong your colony is with bees and then sort of feed accordingly? Because I know a lot of people I've worked with this year have been honey bound. Their hives are honey bound, and then they have repeated swarms, and it's just a disaster for them. And then you're taking out frames that don't have honey necessarily, but might have cane syrup as much as any kind of negative.
Yeah, but figuring individually with colonies, this one's very heavy, so it's going to need more winter stores. Randy Oliver looked at some data that a bunch of people have collected, and he found that the very strong colonies in the fall come down to a point, but if you feed some of the weaker colonies, they come up to a point. And that point, at least in his area, he's saying, well, that's what they should look like so that he has colonies in February to remember that. Most of us are not that sophisticated to be able to do those measurements. Do we have to feed a strong colony more than a weak colony? Usually we think the opposite. We have to end up feeding a weaker colony more than a stronger one. So that we get it up to weight.
Yeah.
All the way back.
Did I hear you right? Did you say beet sugar is also an okay sugar?
It's cheaper. Usually it's quite a little bit cheaper, yeah.
Okay.
One of the issues some people have is 98% of the beets that we grow in the U.S. are genetically modified. The cane sugar, we have exploited human populations, no matter where we grow the cane sugar, for centuries and centuries and centuries. And that's a worse story than that.
If it's any help, the sugar molecule is identical regardless where it comes from.
Thank you. Correct.
Wait, I have a second part of the question.
Okay, yes.
If that's okay. So I'm noticing a lot of mold, dark mold, on the front entrance or like maybe a side or something like that on the outside. Is that indicating some moisture problems maybe on the inside, or is that okay for this climate? I mean, it's worrisome to me.
Dark mold on the boxes.
Yeah.
On the outside.
Like maybe, like I'm noticing particularly like near the entrance and things like this.
Anyone else with that?
I have some on the inside.
On the inside.
Inner cover sometimes.
On the inner cover. Yeah, we'll often see it on the inner cover. Inner covers in the spring, for example, with moisture issues. We'll see it there. On the outside, though.
And they're really healthy colonies, so I'm just kind of...
Shady location.
What was that?
Shady location. Is it a shaded location without air circulation? Stagnant air, perhaps?
No. Okay, yeah, I was just curious.
Shielded, keep it drier.
Shielded, keep it drier, put an extra cover, a big piece of plywood or corrugated tin over the top so the rain isn't pounding right there at the entrance.
Okay. Thank you.
So you stop feeding at the end of October, and then do you take your extra box
extra box to protect your feeder, that will come along with those liquid feeders.
And then a totally unrelated question, I've noticed, I have a screen bottom, and I've noticed that the screen bottom is, the bees are all just covered and hanging out down there on the
Below the screen bottom, or on the bottom.
They're on the bottom. There are a few, couple that come around from the outside on it, but the whole bottom of it is covered with bees.
I would say an indication of a strong colony, and not a problem that they're hanging out on it. And even when it was warmer, that they would come out at night and cluster even below that. Not normally an issue. Some people like to close that screen bottom board. The data doesn't support that we need to. The data supports that we need the added ventilation. But almost all of us are going to feel that, oh, we've got to tuck them in for winter. We've got to, close that bottom, so put the screening in. Glenn?
I had a swarm move into some equipment that I was waiting to clean up, and they just moved in, so that was 4 months ago, and they still don't have a bottom board, and I'm going to go through the winter that way, without a bottom board, to see how it works.
1937, there was a bee culture article, bottomless beekeeping, referred to the colony being bottomless. Or the beekeeping allowed. Say again, please.
They're prophylizing the screen bottom.
Prophylizing the screen bottom. Yeah, they will do that with screens on top. Some people use moving screens, or instead of an inner cover, use a big screen on top, and they will prophylise that. Not so common that they're prophylizing the bottom screen. It's just that grouping of bees that you have are just getting carried away with propolis. That will happen with top openings as well this time of year. Our best intention is to give them nice air circulation, so we've got top entrances on them, and they just will propolis them just tight as can be, just as close as can be.
I've had them propolis the entrance completely over, just leave that much. So it'll be a propolis that'll be 8 inches long by 3/4 of an inch high.
I think I told you the story before. I had an apiary with 12 colonies. The year the CCB hit, this was in the spring of 2006, 11 of the 12 colonies died. The one that didn't die was a very heavily propolis colony that I really avoided going into it because it got all over me, all over everything. I really had to pry. They glued frames to the bottom. They did this at the entrance. The one colony that I wouldn't have mind losing was the only one that survived. I lost 11 of 12 with that.
So I just want to clarify something you said earlier. Is it too late to take boxes off of the hive that have honey in them to extract them?
Is it too late to take it and extract honey? No, it isn't. The issue is you need a warm room because that honey just doesn't flow. So if you're still going to extract, then you make it a room where you're going to be able to heat it up. Otherwise, it's going to take you a long time to spin that out, a long time. But you can do that with portable heaters. Just don't get hot spots. Portable heaters with fans to move that heat around, okay? And build the air from underneath so that you can push the hot air in and come on up through the stacks. It only needs a day or something, right? Just a day of heating it, even when it's cool. Now, you're all distracted.
No.
Okay. Didn't say that. Yeah. No, it is not too late to extract, by any means. Glenn was extracted. Have you finished extracting, Mark? No? So no, it's... If you don't have the extractor, if you can't do anything, I've said this before, the bees can protect that honey much better than we can. There's no place we can store it nicely and easily without things getting into it. So if it's extra honey, it's usually better to leave it on the colony. Some people will say leave it on a colony above the inner cover. I don't think that's necessary. You can leave it on a colony as a super, as sort of extra honey. Honey is going to crystallize because of the structure of the sugars, not because of other factors. The greatest crystallization is roughly at the mid-50-degree range, okay? And the bees are going to hold their whole hive above that. They're going to hold it above 70. If you pull a super of honey off and put it in the cellar or out in the garage, it's going to get down into that range where that really promotes crystallization. So it's warmer on the hive than where we can generally store it. Or put it into a freezer, the whole super into a freezer. Because it's a unusual curve. It goes this way, greatest amount of crystallization as temperatures go from 90 to mid-50s, but then goes back up as you go down to lower temperatures from the freezer temperature. Unusual. Question?
Okay, I'm going to interrupt just for a moment here, Dewey. Dewey, you're welcome to stay. We're going to take a short break, but I know that you had a long trip. You just flew in from Ireland yesterday, and I know were they still having the potato famine over there? But I'd like to let Dewey go. He's going to be gone for the next six months, and he caught a little bit of a cold over there. So I'd like to give Dewey a big hand and appreciation for.
October 31st is Halloween, Thursday night. We have a social, no cost to join it. And then programming Friday and Saturday. And before you bring your honey here on the 6th, we have a honey show. We have honey in a comb or extracted honey. We have photography. We have beeswax. So we welcome you to join that. We give ribbons as our prize. Tim indicated some great speakers. Indeed, we do. Keith Delphine come from Georgia, Marion Ellis from Nebraska, Bob Danka, USDA fellow from Baton Rouge, some of our people from both Washington State and Oregon State University. But come Thursday night in costume. Okay? We've got donations from both Rule and Glory Bee. Honeybee approved Halloween snacks. Imagine what that might be.
Where is this?
This will be at the Convention Center in Seaside, a mere hour and a half away from here. October 31st, 1st and 2nd. So October 31st. Hope to see many of you there. Thank you. And thank you for allowing me to come and join you for these meetings. Tim indicated I leave for Bolivia shortly after that meeting, on the 4th actually. And I will not be back in Oregon until April. I'll see some of you, maybe I'll see some of you at the national meetings in January this year in Texas and New Orleans. Thank you.
You're going to be around for a little bit here?
Yeah, Glenn's on my computer. So
okay. Oh, shoot. Okay. Well, and don't forget, Dewey's book, if any of you are interested, is available in the back. And we're going to take a short break.
I just want to know if he can take MasterCard for his book. Are you set up?
Can you take a card for your book?
I'm not set up to do it now.
Why? We hooked up this little device.
But you take one tonight and just simply send me a check.
Yeah, or you can just do it. I think she can do it with us, and then we can pay it.
Or through the club.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got ways to run that. I can cut quick announcements real quick. I just want to remind everyone that we do have the extractor, but it's not here tonight, so if you want to sign up for that. Also, those of you who would like to nominate yourselves for an officer position or that you're interested, you can either email us at the officer addresses, or you can come and see us at the break or afterwards or whatever, and just let us know that you're interested. The signs will be here next week, the Bee Friendly Yard signs. They're really cool. And we'll have those at not next week, next month. We'll have those at the next meeting. And the after break part of our meeting tonight will be more Q&A. Myself, Brian Lacey, Glenn Andreessen, and Tom Chester, we're going to address more of your concerns and issues and questions that you might have. So stick around if you would. I understand it's raining pretty hard out there right now. So I totally understand if you want to get out a little early. We might try and let it out a little bit early tonight, but we want to make sure that we've addressed all your beekeeping questions and stuff beforehand. Let me see. I'd like to just, we're going to go on, oh yes, and Tom, again, has brought plenty of magazines, Bee Culture and ABJs, American Bee Journals. Any of you, there's great information in those. Please help yourself to any of those if you want to. Are those to check out?
No,
to the library?
I've got so many of them, they can have them. This is just...
Okay, well that's, free is a very good price. Okay. I'm going to just ask, could I have a show of hands of those of you that are, this is your first night? Do we? Oh, okay. Okay, let me start right over here. Just do a couple of quick intros real quick. Hey, how you doing?
My name is Ashley B.
Yay! Is that really your name? Oh, God. Do you have any hives? Or?
I don't know. We're actually to start something. So.
Okay, excellent. Oh, that's good. Ashley, and what's your name?
Good. Brandon.
Fantastic. Oh, okay. It's a threesome here, and they are going to start beekeeping here in the spring, I guess. Good. Oh, welcome. I'm really glad to have you guys here.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ashley B. That's an awesome name. I wish I had thought of that. Was there anybody else over here, new members? Where? Oh, right here. You look like you've been here forever. But
My name is Craig, and I just started in April.
Do you have hives, Craig? Okay. What area of that's awesome. Everybody's pretty funny tonight. This is good. He doesn't have hives, but do you have honeybees?
I do, yes.
What part of town are you from?
I'm in Piedmont.
Piedmont. Okay, that's a good neighborhood. Good forage over there. What about Ashley B? Where are you guys from?
Southeast Portland.
Southeast Portland. Okay, good. Okay, well, welcome. Was there anyone else? Yes.
There's got to be more. Come on. I'm Marilyn, and I was a beekeeper in Sonoma County, California.
Hey, Sonoma, Maryland. Well, welcome, Maryland. Do you have bees now?
No, I left one with a friend in California, and I'm going to start again in the spring.
Okay, great. That's awesome. Well, welcome here from Sonoma. Now, whereabouts do you live in Portland, or do you live in Piedmont also? Okay. Yay. So, yeah, you guys are in the same neighborhood. Okay. Well, welcome. I'm glad to have you here tonight, and glad that you're part of it. Maybe you can bring. How many hives did you have in Sonoma? Two. Good. Well, with this spring, we'll all chip in and help you get started. There's plenty of people here that can help you get going. Okay, let me see. Anybody else new? Yes.
Okay. My name is Ken Matley. I have a colony that I lost 50 years ago and trying to decide whether or not to.
That's awesome. And, what area of town do you live in, Ken?
I live in Northeast.
Northeast. Whereabouts? Beaumont.
Beaumont.
Okay, well, we got to make sure that you have one of our queens because that's our mating area over there. Glenn and I are in that same neighborhood. Well, welcome, Ken. Thanks. That'll be good. Are you going to get going again here in the spring?
Debate.
Oh, just jump in. Geez, you did 50 years ago. It's like riding a bike. You never forget. Okay, is that anybody else, new members tonight? I think that's everybody. Good. Well, enjoy the little break. We'll be back with more answers to your questions here in about 10 minutes. Yeah. buy it online at Man Lake, or you can get wrap up those last few kernels of popcorn. And we're going to get back to some questions. Everybody like to take a seat or stand up, or you can do a little dance. Yes. Yes, so that Joey can go home and take a nap. Okay, if everybody would like to come back in, and we're going to go into the Ridgetown Pollen and Nectar Report, and then right afterwards, we're going to do some more Q&A, and then I'll wrap it up for the night. I just wanted to remind folks two quick reminders. Any of you who have bought, you may not be here, the person may not be here tonight who did it, but we believe that somebody took the pub library copy of Dewey's book, and in thinking, and I'm sure they paid for it, but they thought they were getting a new one, and it's made out to. So look in your book, and if it says to pub from Dewey or something like that, then that's the copy that belongs. Did we find it? No. Okay, never mind. I think we got it. All right, good. Well, that was easy enough. The next item was library. People going to the conference. There's a couple of people that can provide transportation, and there are a couple of people that are looking for a roommate to share a room down there for the conference, and also transportation. So I think what we can do is, rather than post phone numbers, is I know that Janae, for example, has a vehicle that will hold 6 people, but she's only going down for Friday. And I know Linda is looking for a roommate to share a room down there to offset the cost. And I think there was somebody else that was looking for a ride down. So basically, how about, could we do that, Mike? Could we do some of this information exchange through the Facebook or email? So we're not, dealing with other people that aren't here. I guess for right now, all of you that want to try and get to the conference and need a room or want to share a room or a transportation, go to at the end of the meeting, just meet in the back. How about that? Okay, I think that's it. Let me see, signs. That's about it. Okay, so sit down for the pollen and nectar report. I can't wait to see this because I've been looking at all the plants that are growing out there and I can't figure out what the hell's going on. Sit down.
Well, one of the comments that I want to make tonight is that these plants that we see them visiting now, I think are not necessarily great plants, but they're the only plants. And some of these things that will bloom for 6 months, for example, fuchsias. You hardly see bees on fuchsias in June, when there's so many other things blooming, but you'll see them visiting them now, for example. So you'll see in some of my slides that how many months that they're blooming, but it happens to be this month too. And also I'm just going to have a short rant, so rant alert, but it happens right off the bat. Because one of the best flowers now, and has been for a while, is the Douglas aster. It's a native, and very pretty. And my wife and I have enjoyed looking at these plants out of our kitchen window. This is where the rant starts. Because this is a new house. They tore down... you want to see what they tore down? I can show you. And took out those trees. The Oregon white oak, hemlock, and a big leaf maple there. Too bad I didn't bring my pointer today. Because the asters, do you have a pointer on something? How do I do this? Right here. The asters that we saw in the last slide are right along here now. I'm going to go back a slide, I think. Yeah. So I'm taking the picture from over here. All right, so I have a series here. Now, when a developer takes out trees on private property, you have about zero chance of getting something replaced because they don't have to do anything if it's from private property. And one of the rules that we have now, the city has, to replace certain trees if they come out from the parking strip, is that they have to replace them with a certain caliper diameter. You know, it has to be 4 inches or something like that. And they are looking at this because it's a problem. Can you buy an Oregon white oak 4 inches in diameter? No. So what you get stuck with from these developers are these non-fruiting pears or these ornamental pears that you would find in Home Depot parking lots. Now they're planted across the street from us. So we had met, my wife and I, and had met with the Concordia tree team. And the Concordia tree team met with the developer. And the developer agreed to put in the trees that we had suggested. You know, replacing one Oregon white oak, some other native trees, and I did throw in a bee tree. But they agreed to do this. And so when it came, that was great. And then when it came time for the planting, I saw the workers over there. I said, boy, those don't look like what we agreed to. So I went over and asked them, and they said, oh, these are these non-fruiting pears. Oh, that pissed me off. So this is what it looked like without the trees. You can see how huge they were over there. Yeah, that's what we have now. Yeah, isn't that an improvement? But anyway, I was so pissed off that one Sunday morning I went over and planted these along the fence. And they're doing well at watching them. And about 3 weeks later, the landscaping crew that comes in to do it, I guess they were weeding over there. Maybe I'll give them some credit. And they pulled out 4 of them. But I went over the next day and planted 4 of them. And now it looks great. So anyway, that's the end of my rant. There's other types of asters now. This is one of my favorite, this lady in black. It really doesn't really start blooming until mid-September. Kind of inconspicuous blooms. You can see they're as big as the bee. But well attended by bees. Another ornamental asters. Sedum, the autumn joy here, is coming to the end now. This is not the weedy oxalis. I think there was some question in previous slides that I've had, because it blooms. You can see all these months here. And I got this start from my neighbor, who yesterday turned 94. And I was mowing her lawn yesterday. And I saw the bees were out visiting her pink wood sorrel here. Yeah. A few of the thistles are still blooming. One thing to remember here with dahlias here, the word that I've always been trying to remember is these collarette classification of dahlias. They're characterized by an open center and then just one layer of petals here, a single layer. And there's quite a few species. I've shown you these before. But I went to the Swan Island Dahlia website, and there's several dozen, or 3 or 4 or 5 dozen types of these collarettes. Crocus. And before we leave the bulb series, there are some bulbs that you can plant now, and I should have put those up there. You know, that fall is the time for planting most bulbs, and they'll bloom then for our bees in the spring. Maybe next month I'll do that. No, the fuchsia is not really a vine plant, but that's where I put it. Not a lot of food going on there, but there are still some of the ever-bearing raspberries. And I think these guys, I put every month there, because I think they'll bloom every month if you let them. This Weigela is still blooming some, as is the Clerodendron. And many herbs now are still blooming, and that's a good source for our bees. Don't have any of mint yet, but buckwheat and the Phacelia. I planted a cover crop of Phacelia about a month ago, and I'm hoping that they'll bloom by the end of this month. Keep you posted. Weed's one of our better. The Rose of Sharon is almost done here, but that's chicory there. We got that still. The false dandelion and then the dandelions are blooming now again. Or maybe they never stopped, but they're visiting them. By the way, my rule of thumb for planting potatoes in the spring is when dandelions that are in the open are blooming. So you kind of keep track of those two. But I've noticed my potatoes, my volunteer potatoes, are now a foot high growing. So, and I've on purpose planted potatoes in the past in the fall to get an earlier harvest in the spring. But you run the risk of a frost killing them, of course. Oh, just to keep you awake here, this is kind of a fun sign. All right, as usual, if you have any additions to this, give me an email. Yes?
There's been a lot of ivy blooming too.
Yeah, ivy does bloom, but, I used to think, boy, the bees really visit that too, but they give the honey a very peculiar taste, and it crystallizes very quickly. I don't know if anybody else has experienced that. Yeah. It's good for bee food, though.
What about sunflowers?
I had the sunflower in there, and I thought, well, there's not too many sunflowers now, but there are some. Yes?
So if you're looking to plant things, we know now that a lot of the nurseries, their stock is pre-treated with neonics. So where are people going to buy bee-friendly plants to be sure that they are not buying plants for our bees to eat that are full of stuff that we don't want our bees to eat?
Well, if they're certified organic, then they wouldn't be. So look for that. Look for the union label.
You might take with Portland Nursery and the Livingscape.
Livingscape would be a pretty good bet, I think. They would.
Not Portland Nursing Club.
Yeah.
Oh, my bad.
They're on the stick end of the carrot mob right now.
Got it.
Because they refuse to pull any of their products.
I mean, they've got a good selection of
But
both
that may
organic and
not apply
non-organic.
to plants. I don't know. But
Yeah.
City Farm doesn't make it.
But I think that the best suggestion is buy organic. And
Yeah.
then they can't use it. And
Yeah.
I know Garden Fever is trying to find out. It's really difficult. But so Portland Nursing might be trying to do
I
the
don't
same.
know.
It's difficult for them to find out if these are treated, if they're not organic.
City Farm does most of their own propagating, so they know.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
I wanted to point out one thing too, on the enjoyment I get of signing up for email notifications from Bee Culture. What's it called? Catch the Buzz or something like that. What's the Buzz or something. But maybe some of you read this too about the Manuka honey. Out of New Zealand. Is that where it's produced? Apparently it has some antibacterial properties or something like that. So it's sought after, and they charge a lot for it. And this email said that New Zealand reported producing about 1,700 tons of it last year. And the email went on to say, however, in Britain alone, they sold 1,800 tons of it. And worldwide, it was like 7,000 tons of Manuka honey were sold.
My math doesn't work.
Yeah. Your local beekeeper is your best source of honey. You know them, you trust her, so shop local. The hive on the scale? It's Well, I took all the honey off now, so it's, I don't know what it is, but they put on a few pounds after I took the supers off. What's your honey production been like, generally? A little one thumbs down here. I think the honey production was good in April, May, June. So if you had drawn out equipment, comb, frames, then you got a pretty good crop, or a decent, or maybe average, all right. All right, a little bit below average, but you got some crop anyway. And if you didn't, there wasn't much in July and August. Question?
Well, I was surprised. We added a second super to one of our hives in the very early August, and it was like completely new and made 75% of it.
Where was that?
In Portland.
Well, that's what I say. Beekeeping in the city is different.
But you say that the rural areas up and down the valley, they just got skunked?
Yeah, this was not a good year at all.
Is there any idea why? I mean, it seemed like such a beautiful summer, long summer.
Dry, yeah.
The flowers, they didn't have anything to keep them going. They needed a little shower once in a while.
And in the city, people water things. Question here?
I planted I think it's called a tomatillo.
Yeah, tomatillo.
So I haven't gotten any of those, but the thing is loaded with blossoms still, and bees have collected pollen on it like crazy. So.
That's good. All right, that's it.
All right, thanks, Glenn.
Okay, there's an article, I think it's in the ABJ, it's called The Other Side of Beekeeping or something like that, or the flip side or something, yeah. And I've always liked that, and, I think, for me, this is always interesting, but then again, I've been a gardener since I was a little kid, so I do enjoy knowing, what else is growing and what I might be able to tell people to plant in their yards so that we're all providing more of the things that the bees need. We're going to have Tom Chester, Brian Lacey, and Glenn, if you don't mind, the four of us, so we're just going to set up here on the stage and answer some more questions for the next 10 minutes or so. And then we've got a great raffle tonight, the perennial plants here, and we've got that are donated for the beekeeping class. And I believe we have a honey gate. I don't know where that is, but okay, well, let's start off with a question from the audience. Yes, sir.
Okay, I was thinking about you guys there. In today's Wall Street Journal, there was an article about a professor in Seattle, Washington State, who is propagating bees, and it talked about that she was able to import bee
germplasm. Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, Succoby, yeah.
Okay, and so she's propagating queen bees, but is able to, I forget what bee semen.
Yeah, germplasm.
Okay, from other countries and that's to enrich the diversity.
I'm sorry, I keep feeling that.
And I'm stumbling into So is that going to help? Can you guys? I mean, that's kind of the same thing you're trying to do.
No, not exactly. No. In fact, Glenn and I had that discussion early on, and I was kind of thinking, boy, that'd be really cool to do it, and Glenn was completely opposed to it right off the bat. So then it changed my way of thinking is that we're trying to breed a Portland queen. We don't want a Russian queen or a German queen or even the Southern Oregon queen. We can get those. We could probably participate in Sue's program and get some of that germplasm for a fee. But we're really interested in finding the bees that are making it, surviving on their own without treatment in Portland.
and then using that as our genetic material to then move on and graft and create another queen from there. And then if they overwinter, then we've got even more years, and then we start collecting data. But here, Glenn, why don't you?
If she can breed a queen that will overwinter here, then that would be great. And we probably use those because it's a heck of a lot of work. But to date, nothing has worked.
Okay.
So that's why our only criteria is that it overwinters. Now, if one of those makes it into our gene pool here in Portland and it helps, then great. You probably never know. Maybe she'll donate some queens.
Any other questions? Yes.
I have a regulation question. I've had a hive in my yard for 3 years now, and all of my neighbors, they love it. We just had one of those developers purchase the house behind us, tore it down, and put up a duplex. Technically, they need to be given, I mean, what happens if they say, well, we don't want bees in your yard? I've had bees in my yard for 3 years, the neighbors have loved it.
Did you use the permitting process
I
initially? Not that I do either.
And I just went around and I said, hey, I want to have bees in, and he said, woo-hoo, we're excited.
I wait for a complaint.
Okay, and I actually put up some bamboo right along so that they probably won't see unless they see me go out in my white outfit sometimes.
Are you in the city of Portland?
I am. I'm in Northeast.
Yeah.
That's sort of the only place as far as I know where it's really an issue.
Right, here.
Do you water your bees well when it's hot and dry in the summer? Give them a nice, little nearby source of water.
Oh, yeah, I've got a pond. I've got a little pond. Yeah.
It sounds like you're doing all the right stuff.
Okay.
And it is complaint driven. So no harm, no foul.
Okay. And they're not, I mean, their entrance and exit is facing away from the new property anyway. It's just.
All good things.
Another question? Yes.
What would be these, I've been having these little beetles on the top of my, top of our hives, like, they look kind of like carrion beetles a little bit, but they're pretty small. And then I noticed that there are some little, the wiggly little wormy larvae. I mean, would they be related to those beetles?
Well, the small hive beetle is a pest that we have not seen, I don't want to say at all in Oregon, because it wasn't
Yeah, there was some in
Todd
Sandy area.
Walsniger's. Yeah. But he had migratory bees and probably brought them in that way. So it's unlikely that it's a small hive beetle.
There is a little beetle that's in the hive sometimes, but it's
But you said it was on.
Yeah, it's more on the outside, it seems like it's really good on the inside.
No, I wouldn't.
Is there a round, dark black beetle or?
Small, almost looks like an ant, but it's not an ant, it's more like a beetle.
Too bad to do that out here.
Yeah, he left right at the wrong. Yeah, I've seen those too a few years ago, and I don't know what it was. I asked Glenn or Dewey or somebody, and then I just wouldn't worry about it, and I haven't. It's not a small hive beetle, though, I can tell you that.
But there's also these little, I've noticed the little larvae, too.
Yeah, that.
It's probably not black spot, because black spot will be further down in the hive.
Okay, yeah, it's just on the top. I figured it was related to the beetles, maybe, or what those things are.
I always send a sample down to Carolyn Breeze, they always use it, see